safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace, and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
This Honourable Senate resumes its sitting, and we were pleased this morning to have visitors from the Shortwood Teachers College, the early childhood educational students, Shortwood Teachers College, and the Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning. We're very pleased to have you here, visiting your Senate, where we conduct the business. I did say two Shortwood. I mentioned Shortwood twice. So there are two, the clerk is making sure that all are covered. There are two sets of people from Shortwood Teachers College, early childhood education, and secondary education students. We're very happy to have you both, and also the visitors from Jamaica Foundation for Lifelong Learning. Pleased to have you here. I know it's a very special morning. Senator Charles did pray that we should put aside all prejudices, but I understand the French are leading, and want to make sure that we remain focused, and there are others who are already focused for future events in the day. Very pleased to be here, and we're going to go down the order paper. Statement by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Minister Paper number 61, an annual report of the Financial Services Commission for the year ended March 31, 2016. Minister Paper number 62, and Foreign Trade Policy and Action Plan, National Foreign Trade Policy Position Jamaica to Increase Foreign Trade, Appendix 1 and 2. Minister Paper numbers 63 to 65, entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues, dated May 14, 21, and 28 of 2018. Minister Paper number 66, entitled The Updated Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises and Entrepreneurship Policy. Annual Report of the Land Divestment Unit for the year 2016-2017. Annual Report of the Child Development Agency, CDA, for the year 2014-15. Annual Report and Audited Financial Statements of the Norman Manley International Airport Limited for the year 2016-2017.
Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions, motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to sitting of the Senate, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the Senate, first obtained public business.
Mr. President, may I get your permission to speak from a seat that is not my own?
Permission granted.
Mr. President, we intend to commence debate on the child diversion bill before us, Child Diversion Bill 2018. pleased, Mr. President, to present to the Senate the Child Diversion Bill 2018. And this bill is really a bipartisan bill, which is aimed at, among other things, enabling the implementation of child diversion measures when dealing with children who come into conflict with the law. Mr. President, in the last fiscal year, Cabinet reviewed a submission to give effect to the above-mentioned provisions. Upon Cabinet's approval, the bill was drafted by the Office of the Parliamentary Counsel and submitted to the Legislation Committee for review. The committee approved the bill for submission to the Houses of Parliament. Mr. President, child diversion is a process of implementing measures for dealing with children who are alleged to, or accused or recognized to have infringed the penal law without resorting to formal judicial proceedings. It is considered to be in the interest of individuals and to further the public interest to use some form of alternative measures to deal with these categories of offenders. Mr. President, in most cases, diversion of children provides greater benefits to the offender, victim, and society than would the formal criminal justice process. Let me hasten to point out that diversion is not intended to make child offenders less accountable or less responsible for their actions. Instead, it is intended to provide them with an opportunity to rethink their lives without getting a criminal record and without the harmful effects of exposure to the criminal justice system. Mr. President, I'm certain this House will agree that some of these child offenders are themselves victims. The challenges faced by our children in conflict with the law in Jamaica has brought into sharp focus the necessity for legislation which recognizes and upholds the basic human rights of children who face the prospect of being deprived of their liberty. Further, Mr. President, as a party to the United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child, Jamaica has a duty to, among other things, put measures in place to deal with children who are accused of breaking the law, as they have the right to legal help and fair treatment in a justice system that respects their rights. Article 40 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child so states. This article also stipulates that governments are required to set a minimum age below which children cannot be held criminally responsible and to provide minimum guarantees for the fairness and quick resolution of judicial or alternate proceedings. Our regional neighbors, for example, Antigua and Barbuda, have recently moved their age of criminal responsibility up to 12 years in February this year, coming from age 8, while Argentina have set it at age 16. In Jamaica, our age is 12. Mr. President, the National Child Diversion Policy was tabled in and around 2015, your time, after consultation with all major stakeholders in government, among civil society and non-governmental organizations. This policy was developed in keeping with local and international instruments such as the Child Care and Protection Act 2004, the Convention of the Rights of the Child 1990, the Radar Guidelines of 1990, the Beijing Rules 1985, as well as the views of concerned citizens and international groups. Through this policy, Mr. President, a formal framework was established for dealing with children in conflict with the law throughout the criminal justice system, and through which we sought to ensure that detention of a child offender as punishment for antisocial behavior was a measure of last resort. One key object of the policy was to develop the mechanism to not only divert children who come into conflict with the law, but also empower them to become responsible and productive citizens through the use of methodologies which are consistent with the restorative justice practices, and see to the enactment of legislation by 2015. 2017. And of course, you recall we did enact the Restorative Justice Act. Mr. President, gone are the days when we ignore child's circumstances and focus only on the wrong that he or she did, which in fact is very consistent with our own biblical teachings. As a matter of fact, Mr. President, research has revealed that factors contributing to the number of children before the court includes lack of adequate parental guidance, mental health issues, and poverty, Senator Damon Crawford. It has also been reported that a large number of our children in state care are suffering from mental health or substance abuse issues. It is therefore crucial that solutions are implemented to address the issues impacting these children, and a holistic approach be taken towards addressing the underlying factors, Mr. President, as well. The Child Protection and Family Service Agency, for example, reports that there are a total of 4,057 children in state care presently. 1,960 of them are males, and 2,097 are females. Of those, we have 907 in foster care, 635 in family reintegration, 1,226 in children's homes, 288 in places of safety, 793 under supervision, 2,008 others who are either in transition into homes, children in kingship care, children with special needs that are in hospitals, or children who have absconded. In the western region of the island alone, Senator Sinclair, last year a total of 526 children were taken in by the Child Protection and Family Services Agency for behavioral issues. The number stands at 244 since the start of this year. Last year, 12 children were taken in because of abandonment, compared to 2018 so far this year, 150 because of neglect in 2017 compared to 65 this year. 57 children were taken in from January to December 2017 because of sexual abuse compared to 31 from January 2018 to present. 122 because of physical abuse in 2017 compared to 46 so far, and 111 for other reasons compared to 178 so far in 2018. So, President, this set of data would worry all of us. And as a minister, as a parent, as a citizen, as a member of the government, I am concerned. I am concerned that the very children that we sometimes label as criminals are themselves victims of circumstances, and that we are likely to be punishing them for doing exactly as they were taught. As minors, many of these children who try in court and are tried in court and locked up in adult or juvenile penitentiaries cannot possibly be held fully responsible for their actions. So we as a government have the responsibility to do what we can to take these children under our wings and show them how to be respectful, productive Jamaican citizens. This is why this bill, Mr. President, is very important. This is why diversion is therefore so important. Mr. President, there are currently a range of sentencing options available to the courts as alternatives to incarceration for children. However, there remain critical gaps, Senator Pernell Charles, to be addressed, such as the unlawful and arbitrary deprivation in cases where they are detained for over 12 months without trial and have their liberty taken away. Failure to address the proliferation of the number of children found in possession of offensive weapons. Failure to address the number of children appearing before the courts for certain sexual offenses. And failure to properly address the increasing volatility of children who themselves are victims of violence or whose families and communities have been plagued by violence. Mr. President, we have made significant improvement in the levels of safety, security, health, and well-being of our students in school. Problem lies in our communities that we also need to transform. Our National Education Inspectorate, for example, has just this year reported that student safety, security, health, and well-being was rated exceptionally high in 4% of schools, good in 14%, satisfactory in 65%. Unsatisfactory, however, was found in 16% and 1% in need of immediate support, which is an overall improvement of 15% since the last reporting cycle. But further, whereas it has been reported there has been an increase in gangs in schools, Senator Skeffrey, I'd like to correct that narrative. Because in saying that while cliques, peer groups, and other groups exist in school, they're not all gangs. These cannot be considered as gangs in the realest sense. In reality, integration and interaction are part of the national development trajectory for youth in the height of their socialization. You know it very well, Senator Crawford. Young persons, and all of us who were once younger, will gravitate to each other because of similarities and likes, and therefore will form new friendships. And many of us have spoken at graduation over the period, particularly those who transition from primary to secondary. You end up in a brand new school, from a small school of 175 to a school with 2,000 children. You have to survive, and you have to form groups of alliances in order to be able to navigate your way. And so these new friendships are formed, and they will join groups in order to survive. However, some of these groups in school may in fact, not saying no, they may in fact have affiliations with communities. In fact, I was shocked to know that a lot of gang recruitment actually take place with primary age children, not necessarily those at secondary or long, but they actually get involved in gangs because the socioeconomic issues where either the parents send them or there's no family to take care of them, so the gang become the family. All those some social issues that we have to resolve. There's no empirical data, therefore, to show an increase in the number of gangs in schools. Nevertheless, this is a representative of a breakdown in society and the role of the state to protect our children. Because it means if it's only at home, or should I say, on the other hand, if it's only at school, rather, that the children is finding love and care, it means that we have serious home and parenting deficits. The reason that gangs have been such an important, therefore, consideration in our society, and even gangs have stepped in as an alternative family for persons whose biological family has in fact failed them. Families whose socioeconomic background inhibits them from realizing their full potential. And let me also say, Senator Crawford, that one of the reasons for the existence of gang is socioeconomic. And I know we could talk about the antecedents to that, because if we don't educate the people and they have to survive and eat our food, then for them, organized crime is an economic activity that they are doing. They may be violent in their execution, but it's just a social phenomenon that we have to deal with. So, Mr. President, poverty, however, in of itself is not a crime. But I absolutely, and all of us, abhor the fact that it is very often those who are poorest in our society, Senator Lambert Brown, who become marginalized, thrown out of school, and are raised in unfortunate social realities that create this sort of phenomenon and cycle of poverty and crime. I'm talking about the level of absentee fathers and children raised in single-parent homes, homes plagued by drug abusers, sexual predators, and other dysfunctions. We have a lot of work, all of us, and this has to be bipartisan. We have to work together to resolve these social deficits. We all have a lot of work to do to prevent our children from becoming victims and hardened criminals, and therefore this diversion strategy could not be more timely. In order to stop this unfortunate cycle, we have to create a better world for our children, a better country for our children. We have to work on more ways to curb behavioral issues and correct social problems that have led our youth astray into a life of violence and crime. We've been trying to be proactive in our ministry with our, and Senator Skeffrey knows that very well, the establishment of safety and security unit at our ministry, safety unit, guided by the school-wide, and in fact, in the school, they also have asked for the establishment of safety in school units. Guided by the school-wide positive behavioral intervention and support framework, and other policies have done tremendous work in schools, such as putting in metal detectors, surveillance cameras, as well as safety and security officers. For the past 2 years, there has been a program at grade 4 level at 23 schools with targets and seek to reform and assist students with the lowest grades and with behavioral issues. Another program run by the Jamaica Theological Seminary, also targeting 23 schools, seek to impress the need for mutual respect in school. It reflects on how rules and guidance are expressed to students and in turn the relationships with authority. Furthermore, principals, guidance counselors, deans of discipline, and other senior teachers in some schools in Region 3, 4, and 5 have benefited from restorative justice practice training. So our national policy is in alignment with the policy in our schools. The other regions will be targeted throughout the rest of this year. In addition to these initiatives, there are ongoing gang inhibitor training in 6 regions, training for safety and security committees. This represents and this rather responds to the call that I made earlier for observing peer groups that are formed in schools. So we just don't see them form in groups, but we keep a check on them so that we have to intervene before they become negative. The child diversion bill is just, therefore, one more strategy for targeting the problems on the national level. So, President, I'd like to reiterate here further that I've just mentioned that the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, therefore, considered itself a key part of our crime fighting strategy. We have been rolling out our 0 to 3 strategy, highlighting the importance of the first 1,000 days of a child's life, the K to 13 strategy, to make sure that we also have an education system that is inclusive, that provides opportunities for all our students so they don't fall victims of circumstances which manifests itself and ultimately in the criminal justice system. I believe, therefore, it's important to intervene from the very start. We have had to pull back and strengthen from the earliest foundations. So, Mr. President, this is a very timely bill. And what I'd like to say is that based on the child diversion policy, provisions of certain services will be through collaboration with other stakeholders in government and civil society. Accordingly, the relevant skill sets will be drawn from stakeholders where and when necessary. Child diversion centers will be included in the justice centers established by the Ministry of Justice. To date, there have been 5 justice centers out of 14 to be established to cover 14 parishes, where the ministry is actively seeking government-owned property to establish the remaining justice centers. Further considerations have already been given to the funding of these new measures, as has been announced by Minister Delroy Chuck. Currently, child diversion is being funded through the Citizen Security and Justice Program 3. Approximately $44 million was earmarked for child diversion for this calendar year. This will cover operations, training, etc. Mr. President, child diversion is not a new phenomenon in the international criminal justice system. As such, policies and programs exist across several jurisdictions, including South Africa, North America, Ireland, and Canada. For example, in South Africa, the National Institute for Crime Prevention and the Reintegration of Offenders, a non-governmental organization, launched the first diversion initiative in South Africa in the early 1990s in the Western Cape of KwaZulu-Natal. The first 2 programs were the Youth Empowerment Scheme, yes, and the Pre-Trial Community Service, PTCS. The practice of child diversion in these countries have indicated that it is a successful mechanism in improving outcomes for child offenders, cost savings, and increased public safety. Similar programs can and will be established here in Jamaica. Mr. President, this legislation is long overdue, and we must make every effort to curb the number of youth who have spiraled into criminal and moral degeneracy. We need this legislation now to tackle the legacy of dysfunctionality and social problems that have been plaguing our society. Mr. President, it is time for us to perform a surgery. Mr. President, one of the recommendations of UNICEF on child protection is the building of national protection system, which should comprise a set of laws, policies, regulations, and services needed across all social sectors, especially social welfare, education, health, security, and justice, to support prevention and response to protection-related risk. Among other things, such systems should support and strengthen families to reduce social exclusion, lower the risk of violence and separation. These recommendations were made from as far back as 2008. You will therefore agree that we are behind and must take deliberate and positive steps to ensure that the right message is communicated, the message that as a nation we are serious about the welfare of our children. We cannot continue to pay lip service. Only through tangible action will we realize measurable success. Mr. President, the bill before us was tabled in the House of Representatives on January 6, 2018. However, there was a delay in proceedings with the debate to allow for further consultation with the opposition. Based on these consultations, certain amendments were suggested by the opposition, and all of these were considered and incorporated. You've seen further refinement. There's a circulated list of amendments that we will take on board as well. But the bill that we have before us also includes 33 amendments that were passed on May 9th, 2018 from the lower house. Mr. President, in conclusion, I just want to highlight the main features, therefore, of the bill. In part one, Mr. President, it sets out the definitions, the objects, and application of the bill. The object of this piece of legislation, Mr. President, is to ensure that every child in conflict with the law is treated in a manner that recognizes and upholds human dignity and worth, diverts the child away from engaging in deviant and delinquent behaviors, and instills in the child respect for the fundamental rights and freedoms of others. In part two, this deals with the establishment of the Child Diversion Office and its functions in clauses 4 and 5, the establishment of the Child Diversion Committees and their functions, clauses 6 and 7, the establishment of the National Child Diversion Oversight Committee, clause 8, the circumstances on which a child is referred to a child diversion program, clause 9, certain protections in relation to child diversion, clause 10, the effect of the child diversion program, clause 11, duty to make reports, clause 12, eligibility for child diversion, the structure of the child diversion program, minimum standards, diversion options, and selection of an option, clauses 13 to 17, non-implementation, discontinuance of a child diversion program, and failure to comply, set out in clauses 18 and 19. In clauses 20, it provides for the minister's powers to prescribe standards to child diversion program. Then, importantly, clauses 21 to 32 deal with police warnings, cautions, and the process of referrals to child diversion. And clauses 33 to 38 deals with court warnings and court orders. In part 3, Mr. President, deals with persons with official duties under the bill and sets out the obligation to secrecy as set out in clause 39. Then clauses 40 to 45 deal with the minister's regulation making powers, application to other acts, and the derogation and stipulation for statutory review are captured. Then in the first schedule, very important, it sets out what are the diversion offenses. Second schedule deals with the constitutional procedures for Child Diversion Committee. The third schedule, very important again, the forms that are to be used under this enactment. The fourth schedule, the schedule sets out the amendments required to other acts to give effect to this particular child diversion in law. So, Mr. President, within my stipulated time, I now end the clause-by-clause summary of the bill before us, and I now commend it to the rest of my colleagues for their due consideration, debate, and support before 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Senator Crawford.
Check out my fandangles.
He speaks a lot to graduations.
You know, I don't mind seeing Brazil losing, so I will hurry up too. He has nowhere to go, sir. Viva la España! But I hear my side calling for a divide on the team that I'm supporting. But all right, no problem. Mr. President, I must say I like what we're trying to do, but I have some concerns about how we're trying to do it. The first concern, Mr. President, exists in the name of the bill, child diversion. I'm wondering, why is it not youth diversion? Because upon preparing for this presentation, I saw that the benefits of diversion was 1, reducing repeat offenses, 2, avoiding labeling, 3, reducing system costs, and 4, providing rehabilitation services. Is it that we perceive that a person at 18 isn't equally due this on their first offense? Because places like Florida, for example, have a total first offense diversion. On your first offense, you can be recommended for some crimes just to general diversion. We're saying that once you reach your 18th birthday, that diversion don't go for you. And I'm saying since the benefits that we seek and the possibility of it working isn't age-specific, why is it that we never go to a youth diversion or a straight crime diversion? Now, what's the big difference? By definition, a child is up to age 18, meaning at the birthday of 18 is no longer a child. A youth goes up to age 30. At the birthday of 30, you're no longer a youth. So if we had a youth diversion policy, then persons between 18 and 30 could have benefited from some of what is proposed here. If we had a first offense diversion, some also would have been impacted here. I see my friend Charles Jr. seemed to be agreeing with me on the possibilities of yes. But we go further now, and we says that I'm concerned as well if a person under 12 years will be affected by this bill. Now, when I consulted with some lawyers, they say it's impossible because the person would have had to commit an offense. However, when I go to section 13, it says that a child is no longer eligible to participate if he has already been referred 3 times, and goes further to say a child is incapable to be referred before 3 years. So if I should do the simple mathematics, it means that it's 9 years. And that 9 years would have to be added to 9 years for him to be under 18. So if a child is already over 12, there's no way he could have gone 3 times with a intervening portion of 3 years. And subsection 13 speaks to that he's not considered for the 4th time. Well, again, I just going to do the simple maths. If he goes in at 12, he can't go back till 15. If he again goes back at 15, he can't go back till 18. At 18, he's disqualified. So if it is that below 12 isn't considered, then it is impossible for a person to be considered 3 times if he cannot be considered before 3 years. So therefore, I was wondering for clarity if it would include that a person under 12 would be considered for that. Now, the other concern that I had is the difference between entry prevention and exit facilitation. I'm going to position crime like it's a room. And we're saying that until the person enters the room, this person cannot be recommended for intervention. A teacher cannot observe a boy and recommend intervention under this big diversion thing to say, I see him going in that direction. This boy would have to have committed an offense. It is therefore that we are facilitating his exit from the room, but we're not preventing his entry into the room. To say that he now had to first do an offense to participate in the diversion. Now, what if a mother observes a boy and say, okay, I understand you have this program. I want you to analyze him and put him in a summer part of the program, or put him in that part of the program, or because I see somewhere in it where you say, okay, him can go to heart, him can go to all these things. Why is it that a person before an offense, who you see heading down the path of possibly committing an offense, that person can be entered into this program? Because you spoke to things like gang recruitment. Gang recruitment don't start with an offense, you know. Gang recruitment start with a par, start with a link, start with a person calling you more often than your mother is happy with. And this doesn't facilitate the prevention of entry. It only facilitates exit. So there's no entry prevention, there's just exit facilitation. And so therefore, let us look at some of the possible ways that we can now look at this entry prevention, because my good friend Senator Brown sent us an article which the World Bank suggests that school connectedness was an important variable in impacting the likelihood of committing some offenses. In fact, the likelihood of many negative actions that persons have taken. When I read the article, it actually carried back something to mind, because I remember when I was asked to run in East Rural St. Andrew as a candidate. When I was our party don't run like yours, you know. But when I was asked to go, they gave me a poll that said we were 7 points behind. That I was 7 points. Well, the party was 7 points behind. After 3 weeks in the seat, another poll came out about a week before election that said I was 11 points behind. I couldn't understand. I was going backwards. And I lay down in my bed and said, I'm not campaigning. And in my heart, I remember the Fortis motto that says, the brave may fall, but never yield. That school connectedness that I could draw upon, that experience at 12 to 18. And while I was reading the document, I asked myself, some of these schools, what would they call upon? How connected are they to those schools? When we look at the 2017 ranking of schools able to pass 5 subjects, including mathematics and English, only 40 of the 161 schools in Jamaica had a 50% chance. Only 40 of the 161 schools. It means that if there's an average cohort of 200, of 32,000 kids, only 8,000 had a 50% chance, a coin flip, of getting 5 subjects. Now, it gets even worse when we look further, because 91 schools had a less than 20% chance. 91 schools in Jamaica had a less than 20% chance of getting 5 subjects. So if there's a school connectedness, it's almost impossible for anybody to be connected to a school like this. But I'm going to go further now. 53 schools in Jamaica, high schools, had a less than 10% chance of getting 5 subjects. 53 schools in 2017 results had a less than 10% chance. And when I say less than 10, you know, there was actually 20 schools with less than 3% chance. So when you say that we're going to have a diversion, it is clear that some of these kids are unlikely. Now, I remember going to a graduation. I'm going to call the name Arden High. Arden High said they had about 24 clubs. Donald Quarry High School don't have a playing field. This school is named after one of the world's greatest athletes. It don't have a play field. So when I see a bill that said that it is focusing on after the fact and nothing exists to do before the fact, I have a problem. The minister spoke to the reality of poverty. And I've always said poverty is not a cause of crime. In my opinion, poverty don't cause crime because it doesn't fit any of the two likely variables, the two required variables for causation. The majority of poor people don't commit crime. Therefore, that is a #1 variable for causation. We have over 500,000 persons living below the poverty line. If I should give a murder to a different murderer, if every single murderer was a different murderer, we have less than 2,000 murderers. And we have 500,000 people living below the poverty line. If poverty caused crime, there should have been much more outcome of crime. What poverty creates, however, is a reduction in risk because I have less to lose. So therefore, if I should want to thump somebody in the face, and Senator Charles Jr., no, I'm saying both of us are planning to thump somebody in the face. God forbid. Based on your level of wealth, which is 5 times mine, you may perceive you have more to lose. No, I'm working on catching him up. I'm working on it. So I'll flip it. So if I am richer than you, I will perceive I have more to lose. I'll perceive that I can't give up my house. So therefore, thumping in your face don't give me enough reward. I'll perceive I can't give up my job. Thumping in your face don't give me enough reward to take that risk. The man that have no job, that have no house, that have no family, he has nothing to lose. So therefore, poverty don't create the instinct to be criminal. However, it will facilitate because it reduces risk that a person perceives. Now, when we look at what is happening with our children, they're getting funding from PATH equivalent to $30 a day. That's the funding from PATH. Now, every time somebody in government, them name how much people on PATH. How is $30 a day going to reduce the intent or the risk a man feels in committing a criminal activity? So when I look at this bill, I don't see enough in that to actually speak to that. In fact, the bill is centered in the Ministry of Security or Justice and not centered in the Ministry of Youth. Now, where a bill is centered, tell you where the priority exists. I learned that from being in government. When we went to the Ministry of Security about noise abatement wasn't the Ministry of Security biggest deal, it was the Ministry of Entertainment biggest deal. But it wasn't the Ministry of Security biggest deal. When we went to, you see, sometimes, you know, my mother tell me to don't pay no attention. You know, when we went to the Ministry of Local Government, asking them to consider entertainment-rated events, they didn't want no resistance to people paying them money up front. Different ministries have different priorities. If the priority is the child, then the locale of the bill should have been in the Ministry of Youth. In fact, I see all the references to the PS in security and the PS in justice. And I see none, even in the committees, to the PS in youth. Sure. Now, that tell me that you're more focusing on the crime part than the youth part. And that's why I am concerned about this bill. In fact, the UNICEF have suggested that they found a problem with most of our efforts with children that are in conflict with the law to be placed outside of the children entities and in the legal entities and not in the children entities. And so therefore, I equally had a problem because I thought the systems were not in place. I was looking at Florida, persons were recommended to the Boys and Girls Club. A systematic thing that they have there. When I tell you that you have 121 schools with less than 50% chance of getting 5 subjects, that's not a principal problem. That's not a teacher problem. That's not a school problem. That's a systematic problem. Now, within this bill, it says that it doesn't consider our history of income disparity and the social cultural realities that come with that. I mean, the minister himself said that most of the people that were children, that were actually in the care of government, or that were in conflict with the law, was because of a lack of parental guidance. However, in this bill, it continued to say, parent is one of the people that can attend. Now, it put the man with a bad parent at a grave disservice. I think a lawyer should have attended. And if he's not a lawyer, you should provide one for him. Because a lawyer with sense, when Ransford attend for his son, not in this house. I'm a big man now. But I'm joking after the over. But if Senator Abraham should appear with his son, he's at an advantage as versus someone who appeared. You appeared for me. And I was at an advantage because what they accuse me of, I never do. But I'm saying, had I not had that advantage, he used to bribe me with ice cream. That's what he used to do. But I'm just giving the example that another mother, another father, another aunt who don't have similar experience. So when you require, especially for persons unlikely to be able to afford a lawyer, that the only person that have to be present is a person untrained, unexposed, uninformed, that is a risk that don't take into consideration the great divide that exists between our families and the socio-cultural realities that exist with our families. When you say that a child, one of the options is just to restore, to pay for what they have damaged, then no child is earning an income. So you're really judging the mother now, the mother's ability to afford, or the father's ability. And as a mother for spite, because many of those lower level families is single parent. That's the socio-cultural reality. So now you're saying, if a well-to-do boy go with a poor boy on the same mango thieving venture, in thieving the mango mash up somebody's car, that one boy can simply just pay back for the part when mash up, and the other boy would now have to do community service. I ask you, which of those boys are likely to fail at the intervention effort? The one who pay and gone, or the one who have 6 months to clean up the garbage? That's not equal justice. That's not even justice. And so therefore, I had a concern with the system that exists. In fact, I have a concern with the system that exists because history is important. And what you have put in this document is likely to need funding that we're unlikely to provide. In fact, I was listening to a radio program the other day, and the minister was on the radio program suggesting that they were carrying the caseload to 40, and they were currently at 60. Sissoko hear this interview, call in and say it's a lie, that the caseload was over 100 to 1. That is how impacted Sissoko was, Call in on the program and said there's no 1 to 60 nowhere. It's 1 to 100. That's our history. CDA, inaccurate. You were listening to the program. The CDA is also understaffed. In our high schools, no, I don't want to get distracted now by saying somebody lie. I'm just, because this is a serious issue we are talking about. Yes, all right. But make we talk, my brother. I'm saying to the president that we have now systematic problems that we're not considering. Now, with this thing that say we're going to have a department, we're going to have a committee, you tell me one unit that is properly staffed. The UNICEF 2018 report, it says a lack of adequate human resource, limited financial and material resource, and in some instances, aged and failing infrastructure compromise the extent to which the nation can react to children issues. How are we going to fund this? Because right now, we have in our high schools 1 to 1,000 ratio for guidance counselors. The recommendation is 1 to 200. 1 to 1,000. Our ratio of students to guidance counselors. In fact, you yourself said that. You said you were targeting, but let's go 1 to 650. Ruel, read himself. Ruel, read himself. But let's go 1 to 650. The recommendation is 1 to 200. The recommendation is 1 to 250. The point is that we are in a system that we have not been able or willing to fund none of the activities in the history. So instead of primary schools, small schools have none. Oh, I don't think the good senator know that. Small schools have none. Many primary schools have none. That's the reality that we face. So when we check this thing now, what's the likelihood that you're going to have? Because you see, in this thing, it says that if a child failed to complete, he can then be charged. Now, when you don't have enough supervisors, when you don't have enough in the government system, there was 1 psychiatrist for children. It has now raised to 4 to 5,000 kids. That's the people in the care of government. It is 4 psychiatrists. What tells me that this child that is supposed to carry out an activity that is supposed to be written individually for him? That's what this says in it. So that upon observation of the child, you will design something for him. And then you will supervise him. Nothing in our history said that we will do that. Nothing in our history said that we will do that. So we lack those programs. Cub Scout is still around. One time it was extensive. Government don't assist it to grow, to stay alive. Girls' Guides. One time it was extensive. There's one for farming. 4-H Club. There was a time that it was extensive. Rotaract. Time that it was extensive. Those things are no longer as extensive as they were. And so therefore we don't have the system in place. Even if we have the bill in place, we don't have the system in place. The final point I want to make, sir, well, the second to last point, is the unnecessary widening of the net. Of the net, catchment net. You see, what happens is, once upon a time, when you saw a child do something, you just give him a warning, you send him off. Now you have a system that you can go through, and you can now record him and all of those things. Well, let me give you some of the offenses that this thing has. Obstructing clergyman in the performance of his duties. Hindering seaman from working at his trade. Noise from private premises or public premises. Power to seize and detain specified equipment. I don't know what is that? This one says exposing goods for sale in thoroughfare. Now remember, we said this is a child diversion, If a child is exposing goods, somebody tell him to go expose it. You remember you said that a lot of them were doing as they were taught. We have something for child labor. And somehow we say if a child expose goods for sale, that means if somebody at the stoplight selling chocolate, no, you can put him in a diversion program. Laying timber in thoroughfare. I don't know if this is a demonstration, but this is laying timber in thoroughfare. What sense that mean? Beating mats in thoroughfare. When I used to grow up, your mother gave you the mat for beat out, you go to a lane, and you lick it on the wall. That might be the thoroughfare. You will go in a child diversion program. Beating mats. What sense that mean? Beating mats. M-A-T-S. In thoroughfare. Emptying privies at improper hour. Now I don't know what the improper hour is. But what's a privy? I don't know what's a privy. That's a chamber. Call it a chimney. So therefore, at what time is it appropriate for me to empty my chimney? And where do I empty that chimney? And why is it illegal to empty? Because it needs emptying. Are you saying they should flush their chimney? Now, if somebody had a flush toilet, they would likely not have a chimney. This is madness, man.
Oh my, 21st century.
It says, disturbing public worship. What? Oh my God, nobody look over this. Disturbing public worship. Drunk and disorderly person may be apprehended. Person found drunk in the streets. That's what I'm saying. That is not the child focus now. That's the victim. You're now punishing the victim. We have another one now where say, this is the one that made me drop off on my bed last night, 2:30. It says, if the child is a squatter, this is the child, you know. Yes. Page 42, subsection 8, under the Trespass Act. It says, if the child is a squatter. Now, if the child 13, 14, 15, him couldn't choose. The only other option for housing is pay rent or pay mortgage. If the child is a squatter, it can't be the child's offense. So tell me the context. You have an opportunity, because I see where this says any offense under these things here, it says any offense under the following provisions. And it was listed. So what is the context I should take it in? Because it says squatters. In relation to children between 12 and 18, if they're a squatter, it is not their doing. We don't know. You're saying that there is a 12-year-old who chose to go and live on his own in a squatting thing. He's a runaway, he's not a squatter. Your definition is improper. Finally, put them in a children's home. Don't let me tell you about what I hear about happening in the children's home. The sexual abuse that I saw in the Observer, reported by the JFJ, carried out by not only children but adults. Sending them to a children's home is not a diversion. It is a direction. Of course, because we're incapable to put enough persons to supervise of squatting and send them to well, the children home haven't proven its ability to divert. That's why a squatter can't be a child. The final thing, sir, is the risk. There's a risk presented by this bill. A risk presented by this bill, where adults will then ask children to take the fall. Where adults will influence children to carry out certain acts. So therefore, because there is no repercussion, when them come to lock off the sound, because that is in it, you know? Noise Abatement Act. The selector will say it is a 12-year-old party. And the 12-year-old now going to diversion. That's the risk that we have. That you have suggested that there is a segment of our society that can take. No, there's some that makes sense. No. That's why I say I like what you're trying to do, but I don't like how you're trying it. I am happy to see diversion in sexual offenses. And I want it to be extended to certain other things, because a boy that is just not sufficiently exposed, who not putting in enough effort in school, his classmate when he's 17 could be 15. His classmate. And for being promiscuous, we used to lock him up. You have now said you'll put him in there. I applaud you. But I still am shocked that if he's a squatter, at 12. You plan to say that's an offense on him. That don't make sense. But look at this part of saying, in communities that are already giving children gun to carry. You have heard the stories. When police there, you give the school uniform person the gun to carry. Yeah. So when them come in the house now, you just give it and say, yours because you'll go in a diversion program. Yeah. I see nothing in this for a child to report that an adult gave him and the repercussion for the adult to not ask him to take the fall. I see nothing to prevent adults from, when you're selling on the road, as you say now, and the run come, the mother just run left the picnic. Because you will know. So instead of divert now, we're asking people to now position their children to take the fall. That's a possibility that even the research has shown, that in diversion programs, persons have taken effort to ask children to take the fall for them. So, in my opinion, I think we should look back at this. I think we should extend it at least to youth diversion, because the benefits that is proposed and the things that are put into the what that section, where they say what the bill wants to achieve, the objectives, that don't stop at 18. The memorandum on objects, that don't stop at 18. A 19-year-old first offense might be able to go in diversion. That's why I'm saying that this bill, there's nothing that causes us not to say youth adversion, including people under 18. Nothing that says that. There's not a first offense. Are you going to come now with another one? Let us look at some of those things. And I'm asking you just to review within the context of our culture what some of your recommendations are for it to be recommended. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Crawford. Senator Webby.
Sorry, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And as usual, I want to congratulate the two previous speakers, Senator Reid and Senator Crawford, and what I would consider as two excellent presentations. So, Mr. President, I rise to contribute to the debate on the child diversion bill. And as you have heard from both senators before, this bill really provides an alternative mechanism for dealing with children in conflict of the law. It really, Mr. President, if you think about it, Mr. President, while I support this bill, I would like
Check. Check.
Thank you very much. I was starting to think of a conspiracy theory, Senator. Eh? Eh? So, Mr. President, so as I said before, we had that little technical difficulty. I think I'm on now. Let us ask ourselves the question as we look at this bill. What is the typical profile of the Jamaican child who is in conflict with the law? What is the typical profile of the Jamaican child who is in conflict of the law? Mr. President, I've read a few studies, but the one that stands out more is a study done in 2011 by the Office of the Children's Advocate. And that profile is very simple, Mr. President. It is male between 16 and 17 years old. While the study is a bit dated to 2011, I doubt that the profile has changed since the time of the study. Importantly, sir, practitioners who contributed to the study cited a number of reasons why children are in conflict with the law. The first one being poor parenting and lack of supervision. And secondly, Senator Reid, frustration with the school or being illiterate or semi-literate were identified as the main reasons. Let me now look at the issue of parenting. I think all of us will agree that there's no outside force that has a greater influence on a child than their parents. Good parenting and family structures can greatly improve the behavioral outcomes of children, especially the ones who are most vulnerable. Mr. President, I strongly believe that the majority of parents genuinely want to do right by their children. And you know, another research, Senator Brown, that I came upon, and Senator Crawford, which I reflected on it and I found it very interesting. It was a study done by Dr. Herbert Gale, because you know, sometimes as men in societies, we are often criticized of not being good fathers or active fathers. And I think if you look at the historical aspect of that, and I'll share it with you, do you know, Senator Knight, that in 1948, pre-independence, only 18% of Jamaican families had active fathers, have active fathers in the household. In 1981, that rose to 23%, so we're moving in that right direction. By 2001, Senator Crawford, it was at 37%. Mr. President, I'm happy to say that the latest survey shows that the active fathers in the household is now at 42%. 42%. So I want to use this opportunity, Mr. President, to sincerely big up all the active fathers in the household. Big up the active fathers in the household. And I want those who are not in the 42% to get into the 42% and let us grow that 42%, because I believe active fathers in the household can make a significant difference in the lives of children. And all the statistics shows that. Mr. President, I am aware that the National Parenting Support Commission is having a number of initiatives, and I want to congratulate them. And I'll share with you some of the initiatives that the National Parenting Support Commission has. They have the Parent Mentorship Program in place. The parent places have also been erected all across the island. And these spaces are where parents may go to receive parent education, de-stress, and foster education through play with their children. I'm happy to see, Senator Morrison, that one will be established in Mount Salem where we have Zozo, because that is a part of the whole social intervention. Having said that, Mr. President, I believe that when we have these initiatives, we should have a system of constantly evaluating the effectiveness of these initiatives and not be afraid to make the necessary changes if required. And we must also invest heavily in these programs so we can make a difference in the children's lives. Mr. President, the other point that I'd like to make, and even as a private sector leader, the whole concept, Mr. President, of mentorship is so important for the boys that are vulnerable, which we have shown up in this study. Mr. President, I came across an interesting initiative in Canada where boys that are vulnerable, they have a system in the summer where they actually go and work in the police force in Canada. I know it has increased significantly over the years, and the success story of Senator Fraser Binns is phenomenal. In fact, I read that some of these boys that enter that program in the summer as youths actually leave school and enter the police force after that. And I want to encourage us, Mr. President, let us as a country, Jamaica, let us start thinking outside of the box where we can have serious mentorship program, and why not adopt that system of the young boys working in the police force. And I'll make a commitment this morning that it should be a private sector, public sector initiative that we can get this done. Mr. President, let me also congratulate Minister Floyd Green for the work that he has been doing in the All-Island National Mentorship Scheme, as it is at an advanced stage. But having said that, Mr. President, I also believe that in our country, we need a structured apprenticeship system to keep these youths out of trouble. There is a great example in place. The youth program is a great example, which has been providing at-risk youth in inner-city communities with employment training. And the last time I checked, Mr. President, approximately 2,000 young people have been trained and gained employment through the youth program. And I want to call on us, let us expand that youth program twofold as we move forward. Mr. President, this is one of my loves, and I really feel very passionate about it. And it is about sports and the impact sports can have in a society. Mr. President, there was a United Nations study on sports, and it recognized sports as an instrument for promoting peace and for playing a significant role as a promoter of social integration and economic development. You know, Senator Knight, and I know you're a big sports fan like I am, and a so-called retired cricketer. Mr. Senator Knight, have you been, Mr. Senator Knight, when you look at the sports facilities and infrastructure that we have in place, look at cricket at Lucas, Kensington, and all those clubs. It's appalling. It's appalling. And I'm saying, but even Kingston Club, the point that I'm making, Mr. President, I really think that we can use sports, invest in sports heavily, invest in the infrastructure, invest in training for the young people. Look at the Shelley-Ann Frasers and the Usain Bolts. And there are many others, right? So my call this morning, Mr. President, is that we need to develop more community sports program and invest in infrastructure in sports. Mr. President, these clubs need visionary partners and financial support in order to become sustainable source of social reform for the respective communities. So, Mr. President, I'm going to close by saying that the children are our future. I support this bill, but I think the conversation and the discussion as a country should be more on the preventative measures that we can not use this bill as stated. So that is where I believe that the focus should be on. Mr. President, the future we create will depend on how well we support our children to becoming the best young men and women they can be. In order to secure the future today, we need strong families with well-equipped parents, positive role models who can provide mentorship and opportunities for developing skills through sport and apprenticeship program. Mr. President and colleagues, I thank you very much.
Mr. President,
Thank you, Senator Webby. Senator Reid.
I'm moving to suspend the debate at this stage, sir. And I also would like to ask for recommittal of announcements and the notices of motions given orally.
The question is, we move to suspend debate. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it, conclusively. Announcement.
Also laid on the table of the Senate today are the Public Procurement Regulations 2018 under the Public Procurement Act and the Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review Regulations 2018 under the Public Procurement Act.
Notices of motion.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the Senate, on behalf of the Leader of Government Business, I'll move the following two motions. The Public Procurement Act, Public Procurement Regulations Resolution 2018. Whereas by virtue of Section 61 of the Public Procurement Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make such regulations as he thinks fit to give full effect to the provisions of the Act and without prejudice to the foregoing. Regulations may prescribe provisions in relation to matters specified in paragraph A to J of Section 61. And whereas on the 3rd day of July 2018, the Minister made the Public Procurement Regulations 2018, and whereas it is provided by Section 62 of the Act that regulations made under paragraph A, C, E, F, and G of Section 61 of the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution. Now therefore be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. This resolution may be cited as a Public Procurement Regulations Resolution 2018, and 2, the Public Procurement Regulations, which were laid on the table of the Senate on the 6th day of July 2018, are hereby affirmed. And the second one, Mr. President, the Public Procurement Act, Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review of Regulations Resolution 2018, which reads, whereas by virtue of Section 61 of the Public Procurement Act, hereinafter referred to as the Act, the Minister may make such regulations as he thinks fit to give full effect to the provisions of the Act and without prejudice to the following regulations, may prescribe provisions in relation to matters specified in paragraph A to J of Section 61. And whereas on the 25th day of June 2018, the Minister made the Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review Regulations 2018, and whereas it is provided by Section 62 of the Act that regulations made under paragraphs A, C, E, F, and G of Section 61 of the Act shall be subject to affirmative resolution. Now, therefore, be it resolved by this Honourable Senate as follows. This resolution may be cited as the Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review Regulation Resolution 2018, the Public Procurement Reconsideration and Review Regulations 2018, which were laid on the table of the Senate on the 6th day of July 2018, are hereby affirmed. Mr. President, I would like to indicate that we intend to do no further business for today, and we now ask for the adjournment of the sitting of the Senate for a date to be set. With your leave.
Those in favor? The question is that we adjourn. The Minister stated. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Mr. Marshall.